History shows there's only one way for the Sacramento Kings to attract free agents, and no, it's not just money. I'll explain on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer at ABC 10 News. And we know Sacramento never been a free agent destination in the NBA, even though we love our city, even though it's a great city, not just to watch basketball in, but to live in. Even though the Sacramento Kings organization hasn't had the most success over the last 16 years, we know how passionate this fan base is, how they've continued to stick around. Sacramento has a lot of things going for it. And a lot of reasons why players, when they come to play here, they actually like playing here. However, Sacramento has never been a free agency destination. We know this. We know that the Sacramento Kings can never truly rely on the free agent market to drastically improve their team. So if things go right for the Kings this year, let's say they make either the play-in or the actual playoffs. Let's say they make the playoffs via the play-in. Say they're a seventh or eighth seed. They win that first game and they make it to the playoffs. They lose in the first round at that point. Doesn't matter. They're swept. Doesn't matter. They make it to the playoffs. They accomplish that goal that the Sacramento Kings organization has set for themselves, ending the playoff drought. But now you want to improve. You want to build upon that. Well, a lot of the expectation is that, hopefully, with that experience and with a full season together, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, that pairing will get even better and help take the team to the next level. Maybe Davion Mitchell takes a jump. Keegan Murray takes a jump, right? There's ways of looking at this roster right now and saying, okay, this roster itself can improve without too many major additions. But if the Kings want to improve on top of that, they either have to hit a home run in the draft with a non-lottery pick. If the Sacramento Kings make the postseason, they're not going to have a lottery pick. Or I suppose they could pull off a trade, but how many trades are out there that the Kings are going to drastically improve their roster without trading away something of significance? Or free agency, right? Finding a way to attract a player or two that can come in and instantly make this team better. And we're not talking about like Kevin Durant joining the Golden State Warriors status, right? That's a very significantly different circumstance. The Golden State Warriors became a championship team, became one of the best teams in basketball, winning, 72 games in a season. And then Kevin Durant joined on. Like, as much as we would love for the Sacramento Kings to attract the biggest free agent in the 2023 class, that's not necessarily realistic. The Kings are going to have to do a lot to be able to pull that off. And I would argue that even if this team won the NBA Finals, they probably have a slim chance of attracting the biggest name. But there's only one way that the Sacramento Kings can attract a free agent that's actually a difference maker. Because there's always going to be a free agent or two that the Sacramento Kings will bring on, some of them decent to good players that typically sign contracts that are maybe a little bit more than what they're worth. And they come here to Sacramento and they're either fine or they turn into something decent, or what we've seen most often with names that have been successful elsewhere, they kind of flame out a little bit, right? We could talk about Dwayne Dedman. We could talk about George Hill. Free agent signings that they are coming off of good seasons and good roles with their other teams. They came to Sacramento and it didn't really work out. If the Kings are going to attract a difference maker free agent next summer, and it's crazy, we're talking about projecting something that is a year or a little less than a year from today, there's one thing the Kings can do, really, only one thing. And it's not financially related. It's not money related. Look, we know that the Kings have to overpay to get free agents here. It's the Sacramento tax. And it's not just because they're in Sacramento, it's also California state tax, things like that. This all plays a factor, right? The Kings have to pay more typically to get players here or to keep players here. But that, to me, that I use the word attract specifically because I don't look at using money and overpaying a player to come as an attraction. I look at that more as almost a bribe, right? You're bribing them. You're paying them extra to come to Sacramento. And the reason why I look at it that way is because everybody's on a level playing field with the salary cap. Every single team has to take into account the salary cap to make their moves. Now, if it was free bidding for everybody, first off, the Kings would be screwed because everybody would go to major market teams, right? Like you see in baseball almost. But the Kings at that point could really dig into Vivek's pockets and ownership's pockets and say, we're going to throw this ridiculous contract at this player. And we're going to basically say that there is no team on this planet that will pay us more or pay you more money than we're willing to pay you. Right. But that's not realistic. That's not real. That's not how the NBA works. It's a level playing field with the salary cap. Other teams can take the liberties more of going into the luxury tax to operate. And we see that a lot with some of the bigger market teams who are trying to pay for championships, essentially. But in the Kings circumstance, there's a wall that they can go up to. So even if they overpay free agents, they still hit that wall. So that's not attracting free agents to me. That's almost bribing them, right? To attract free agents, the only thing the Sacramento Kings can do is this season win games at an appealing rate. And what I mean by that is if the Kings become an exciting squad this year that overachieves, that makes the playoffs, maybe wins a couple of games in the opening round, maybe they win a playoff series. Now that's really hitting on all cylinders. That's really striking gold this season. I think that's like the best case scenario for this Kings team. The best case scenario is them making the playoffs and actually winning a playoff series because they're going to be the lower seed in the opening round, right? If the Kings can find a way, De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis really hit it off. Let's say Keegan Murray wins Rookie of the Year, looks like an absolute stud. Mike Brown has this team playing inspired basketball. The defense is better. The chemistry is better. And the reputation in Sacramento is almost changed after one season. Winning can cure a lot of things. It sounds like a fantasy scenario that I'm presenting, but we've seen it happen before in the NBA. Not necessarily here in Sacramento, but we've seen it happen before. Hell, look at what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s, how quickly things turned around for the Sacramento Kings. Before that, the Kings were a garbage organization. They still had a phenomenal fan base, right? But the Kings were terrible. All they did was lose in their time in Sacramento. Then things flipped quickly, and they went on that magical run. Now, you could say, hey, man, even during that magical run, though, they struggled to attract free agents. Vlade Divac is the best free agent that the Kings were ever able to sign. And to that I say, you're right. But at the same time, the Kings were a very specifically built team to where they didn't need a big name free agent to come in. Now, maybe had they gone out and gotten a big name free agent, I have no idea who was available at that time. Maybe that would have actually cemented the Kings winning a championship. But what made the Sacramento Kings so good at that time was they were a well-crafted, well-constructed team who already had a star in Chris Webber. Now, I'm not saying that De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis are Chris Webber status. Maybe the two of them together can develop to be just as important to a winning team as Chris Webber was here in Sacramento in the 90s and 2000s. But what I'm saying is, if De'Aaron, Sabonis, Murray, Brown, Mitchell, if they can have a good enough season and play an attractive style of basketball, have a great season to where we're talking about, man, this team is going places. Remember what we were talking about with the Phoenix Suns, right? During the bubble. Like they went undefeated during the bubble, still missed the playoffs, went undefeated during the bubble. And the talk around the Phoenix Suns going into that offseason, even though they were still a bad team at the time, was look at what this team was able to do. They had momentum. They were exciting. And look what happened to them. They were able to pull off landing Chris Paul. Again, extremely different circumstance, but that organization flipped on a dime because of that. Now, I think that's a bit wishful thinking for the Kings to have something happen to them to where a Chris Paul type player is willing to just jump on board right away, who can quite literally change the franchise's success on the floor overnight. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for the Kings to play their brand of basketball, establish their brand of basketball this year that is it's upbeat, fast-paced, exciting, better defense, better sense of community, ball moves. De'Aaron Fox emerges as a star. Domantas Sabonis is a phenomenal complementary player who maybe does make a run at an all-star appearance in the Western Conference, although I think I hope he proves me wrong. I think that's pretty unlikely. Sabonis winning an all-star or making the all-star team in the West just because of the Western Conference and how many good bigs are in the West compared to the East. But my point is, if Sacramento can play a better brand of basketball, if they can play an exciting brand of basketball, win some games, build some momentum for themselves, so much so that maybe one name wants to be a part of it, that's the only chance the Kings have to attract free agents. In my mind, that's the only shot they have. So let's take a look. We're going to take a look at the 2023 free agency class at this point. I looked at the class. I've written down some names that I think realistically the Sacramento Kings could make a play for, but only if they have the attractive season that we're talking about, which might very well be best case scenario. I'm very aware of that. I'm not predicting this to happen. I'm saying this could happen, and this is the only way for the Kings to become a somewhat attractive free agency destination next offseason. We'll look at some of those names when we come back. Are you one of those people that thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. It's not only putting yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. So stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Before we jump into the free agency class, I want to say too, I think Mike Brown already helps Sacramento become a more attractive free agency destination. I think he already helps. I don't know if he helped specifically with like the Malik Monk signing, which was the only major signing that the Kings made this offseason. I think Mike Brown comes with a good reputation around the league. He's known as someone who holds players accountable and who gets results, and who has had success in this league with some of the biggest names in this league. But at the same time, too, he's also a player's coach, which is extremely important in the modern NBA, right? He comes from the Golden State Warriors system, is highly endorsed by Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. Like, Mike Brown, I think, only helps the Sacramento Kings become a more attractive free agency destination. But he also has to get on the floor results. So let's look at some of the names that the Kings potentially could go out and target in free agency and may be able to attract if they have that best case scenario of making the postseason with a team that establishes themselves, who looks good, who is an up and coming, exciting team that a player may want to join and play for. We'll start with an obvious name, Harrison Barnes. I think this very well could be the plan for the Sacramento Kings. Harrison Barnes is on the final year of his deal, $18 million deal. He's going to get one more, $18 million this year, I should say. He's going to get one more major contract in his career, in my opinion. I know a lot of Kings fans and Kings media members are saying the Kings should be concerned about losing Harrison Barnes for nothing. That is a very, very, very valid concern. And if the Kings have a season similar to they've had in the 3 seasons that Harrison has already been here, then he's gone. I am very confident in saying Harrison Barnes will move on at that point. He is very over that. But I think the Sacramento Kings know that trading Harrison Barnes right now means they're not improving their team. I think they're almost gambling on the belief that Harrison Barnes will help this team have the season that they're expecting to have, hoping to have, accomplish the goals that they've laid out for themselves. So much so that either Harrison will want to return, or maybe a free agent of Harrison's status or better will want to come here to Sacramento. Now, that's a lot of optimism, a lot of wishful thinking in a lot of ways, right? Very much so. We acknowledge that. But the Kings also have to operate with some belief in themselves. So if the Kings have a really good season, if they make the playoffs, win the play-in tournament, make it to an opening series, and let's say they lose in 6 games in the first round to let's just say the Golden State Warriors, because it'll be fun. The Warriors and Kings have never been good at the same time. We would love a playoff series between those two teams. Say the Kings lose in 6 to the Warriors. That's like best case scenario, right? The fact that Kings could win 2 games against the defending champions in a playoff series. Sure, let's make that the standard, right? Let's say that's what happens. Not predicting that's going to happen, but I'm saying let's say that for this case, that's what happens. That might be enough for Harrison to say, you know what, finally we're doing something right here. I really like playing for Coach Brown. He's revitalized the defense. I know De'Aaron. I know Sabonis. Really like playing with Keegan Murray. Really like this squad. You know what? I'm okay staying here. And the Kings, of course, would probably pay him a little more than what he's worth. And that's okay. By the way, the Kings, as of right now, have $105 million on the books for the 2023 season, the 2023-2024 season, next season. And that includes like the $12 million that Rashawn Holmes is owed. So you could even free some of that up by moving on from him. The projected cap, as of right now, just looking it up, the projected cap for next season is going to be $133 million. So Kings have 105, projected cap is 133, $28 million that they have to work with, give and take. Like, I'm not saying give all $28 million to Harrison Barnes, but he's certainly not a $28 million per year player. But they do have room financially to offer a big contract. Maybe Harrison and one other guy. That is what they're looking for. Maybe you can bring Harrison Barnes back as your starting 3 and go out and get a really good rotation player in free agency. I think that's a possibility. But the point is, maybe the Kings play well enough that Harrison Barnes wants to stick around. Or maybe the Kings have options outside of Harrison Barnes. Maybe he does choose to walk away. Okay, fine. You got to replace him. Maybe there are better options out there that want to play for you to where you say, thank you, Harrison, for your services. We're going to go a little bit younger. I don't know if Andrew Wiggins is that guy. Andrew Wiggins is an upcoming free agent, has experience playing for Mike Brown. Of course, had a phenomenal season last season with the Golden State Warriors. Was really, really good in the playoffs. I'm very anxious to see how good he is with the Golden State Warriors this season. But Andrew Wiggins, potentially. And as far as I'm aware, looking at the free agent tracker, he hasn't signed any kind of deal or anything. Let's see. Andrew Wiggins. Yep, he's on 20. He's being paid, $29.5 million this next season. Holy moly. Does he have a player option? No, he does not. He will be an unrestricted free agent, and he'll be 28 years old, or he is 28 years old right now. So not that much younger than Harrison Barnes, but Andrew Wiggins. Could the Kings have a good enough season partnered with Andrew Wiggins' knowledge of Mike Brown and relationship with Mike Brown to attract him? What about Kyle Kuzma? Now, Kyle Kuzma has a $13 million player option. He will have a player option. Again, this is not this season. This is next season, next offseason. Can you convince Kyle Kuzma to waive that player option, become an unrestricted free agent, and come here to Sacramento? Are you willing to pay him more than $13 million to do that? Those are all questions that we would answer next offseason. But the point is, I don't know if Kyle Kuzma is someone that you feel confident signing. Maybe you feel good about moving Keegan Murray to the 3 and say bye-bye Harrison Barnes, and you bring Kyle Kuzma in and play him as the 4. Kyle Kuzma is not the flashiest of names in free agency, but someone I do believe could help the Sacramento Kings. And it wouldn't take a phenomenal season, I don't think, for the Kings to be attractive to a guy like Kuzma, who I think would get big minutes and have a potentially big role. How much better would he make the Kings? Not astronomically, but again, you're talking about adding talent to a roster that you already expect to, as a whole, improve and take it to another level after accomplishing their goals of this upcoming season. Dillon Brooks, more of a shooting guard, can play the 3, a guy who is not going to command a lot of money, but really has emerged as a really significantly important player for the Memphis Grizzlies. If I'm the Grizzlies, I'm not letting him go, just me personally. But Dillon Brooks is going to become an unrestricted free agent. Is he good enough for the Sacramento Kings to target where he can make some significant changes, especially defensively? He brings some grit to the Sacramento Kings. Maybe that's what they're missing. Maybe the reason why they lose in the opening round of the playoffs is because defensively they continue to struggle. They're just not there yet. Dillon Brooks can make a difference with that. He definitely can make the Sacramento Kings better, but are the Kings attractive enough for him to say, okay, I'm leaving a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who I also expect to be an up and coming playoff team. They already are now. Like, I expect them to make another jump this year. He's expecting them. The Memphis Grizzlies fans are expecting that team to make another jump this season. Basically, the Memphis Grizzlies are almost a year ahead of the Kings in that sense. Can the Kings be attractive enough to get Dillon Brooks to walk away from that? Or maybe financially, Memphis goes in another direction and that works in the Kings' favor. But I guarantee you there are going to be a lot of teams, good teams, that are interested in Dillon Brooks' services. Just depends on his price tag. There's RJ Barrett if you want to go young. Now, the Kings will still have Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter on their payroll. Maybe one of the two of them doesn't work out or the Kings decide to go in another direction. That's a possibility. This is an interesting name, Al Horford. Kings have Domantas Sabonis. They expect to have Domantas Sabonis. I have no idea if the Kings are going to be good enough to convince Sabonis to re-sign or sign a contract extension next offseason. I don't think that's pretty likely because I think he could have he has a better chance of getting more money on the open market. And he's already on a, I think, really team-friendly deal as it is. So I personally expect Domantas Sabonis to go and test free agency. That doesn't mean that he's going to leave Sacramento, but I expect him to go and chase probably what's going to be the biggest contract of his career that he can possibly get in free agency. But could you bring in Al Horford as your kind of old man starting five, move Domantas Sabonis to the 4? Al Horford is able to space the floor so he won't get in Sabonis' way. That's a possibility. And old man Al Horford comes in. Obviously, we saw how good he was for the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals and in the playoffs this year. Who knows if he'll still have that to offer at the end of this upcoming season. But can the Kings be good enough to attract Al Horford for not just a veteran victory lap around the NBA, but someone who can come in and actually make a difference? And there's Jerami Grant, name we talked about a lot this offseason, right? A lot this summer. Talked about the Kings potentially trading for Jerami Grant or using their draft pick this year that, of course, turned into Keegan Murray to go out and trade for Jerami Grant. Grant is a 4. Again, in this scenario, you're either looking at Jerami Grant as a 6-man off the bench, or you're pretty confident moving one of Grant or Murray to the 3. Context that we're all going to need from the regular season. These are names from this upcoming class that are realistic targets for the Sacramento Kings if they have the season that they expect to have. Now, the 3, or rather 4 big names in this class: Russell Westbrook, not interested. James Harden, it's hard. I personally don't like James Harden. That's just me. Like, it's not him the person. I'm not a fan of James Harden's game. I don't think James Harden, he definitely make the Kings better number wise, but I don't think James Harden makes sense for the Sacramento Kings. So I also don't think there's much of a chance in hell that he'd be interested in coming here to Sacramento. You have Kyrie Irving, again, almost the same exact boat as James Harden. Chris Middleton. I thought about including him in the list, but the reason why I didn't, he has a $35.5 million player option to stay with the Milwaukee Bucks that I think he will exercise. Maybe the Kings could try to pay him more here. If they were to do so, they would have to move on from some money. Maybe it's Rashawn Holmes' money, Malik Monk's money, Kevin Huerter's money. That would certainly be the third part of the big 3, maybe big 4 if you include Keegan Murray if he looks really good. Chris Middleton would be phenomenal. I don't know if there's much the Sacramento Kings can do outside of making a miracle NBA Finals run to be attractive to Middleton, so attractive that he's willing to say goodbye to $35.5 million to continue playing with Giannis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee. So I intentionally left him off. But if you like any of those names I've listed, if you think the Kings have any shot at any of those names, talk to me about it. If you don't like them, if there's other names out there that you would like the Kings potentially to target next offseason, do you believe the Kings have any chance of becoming a free agency destination, or is this conversation all just jargon in the offseason? That's fair. Let's talk about it. At Matt George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Again, it's crazy that we're talking about something to happen next offseason. I don't know if next offseason is going to be nearly as important as this offseason is for the Kings. Hopefully next offseason around this time, you and I are discussing how the Kings can improve on a first-round exit playoff team to a team that maybe makes it to the conference finals. Hopefully that's what we're talking about, a team that can go from the 7th or 8th seed to the 4th or 5th seed. That should be what we're talking about next summer. I'm certainly hoping that's what we're talking about next summer. And boy, would that be a wonderful and luxurious position for myself to be in, hosting the Locked On Kings podcast. I'll be 6 years in at that point. I've come nowhere close to talking about anything like that. I think this team is capable of doing it. I think they're capable of being good enough to where at least big name, or maybe not big name, not A tier or S tier, but B plus tier free agents really consider coming to Sacramento and joining what the Kings have going here. I don't think it's that absurd of an idea, but the Kings have a lot of work to do to get to that point. If you want to discuss anything that we discussed on today's episode of Locked On Kings, again, please do so. Reach out to me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Of course, thank you so much for your support. We are nearly in September. I think we're going to have one more podcast before September. And you know what September means? NBA training camps begin. I cannot wait for the training camp battles to happen here in Sacramento. I'm going to have a whole series on the different training camp battles. I'm going to be joined by Brendan Nunez for that series. Very much looking forward to that. So I hope you will join me for that. Appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.